The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome into the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. Landrum Roberts, Pat Smith, Molly Robinson, along with Coach Bill Clark. And Coach, we say this every time we get together, but every time you think it's going to be just a really calm weekend in college football, we get chaos, and we got that this weekend in the SEC.
Yeah, obviously we're going to talk about all those teams, but Alabama LSU is going to kick us off. And, one of the things I think is so exciting is this parity we're seeing. We're seeing big
You like
games.
it? You like the parity?
I do. I love the competition. I love that each week we've had big games that mean something. And, we've talked about what an open date means for a team, what injuries mean, what being at home, what having to go on the road or being at home means. So there's so many great elements I think we've gotten to discuss each week, and this is another week to do it.
And to your point, it seems like in college football, I love it too, Coach. I love the parity. But it had gotten a little stale.
Yeah.
And weekends were so predictable. Every now and then you would get the one-off where somebody gets upset.
Yeah.
But now it's week in, week out, and it's almost a coin flip with some of these programs that have been elite for so long. But now with the transfer portal, some of that has been leveled out as far as the playing field and just how much talent you can stack up on a roster.
Yeah, I'm obviously concerned about those non-Power 4 teams and what's happened to them. We can talk about that. But I think when you start talking about the Power 4 and the fact they've been able to pull guys and make their rosters better and really create depth, I think it's just made for better ball across the board. More teams are better in that upper level. Obviously, I want to see that other level come up too, but I think it's made for some great competition.
All right, so let's talk about the game down in Baton Rouge where Alabama just absolutely dominated LSU. And once Alabama put those first points on the board, Coach, did you feel the momentum and the air being sucked out of that stadium because Alabama just took control from there?
Well, I think and it's always fun for me to go back for things we talked about. What happens on an open date? And I think the biggest thing for Alabama, Milroe getting truly healthy where they could run him. The play design was so good. So many zone read follows that turned into quarterback powers where the running back would be fake to and he would lead for him. That was that elite speed that we were missing. Why was it missing early on? He was beat up. Now, sometimes that may not be a true ankle injury or whatever, but he was slowed up. People were taking advantage of it. I think also the play action throws off that, the 1-2 read takeoff that we had talked about early. Just from an offensive standpoint, he looked like that guy against Georgia, specifically in the first half, that wowed us all.
You look at the first play from scrimmage on the offensive side of the ball. You have a false start. And you think this could not be a good sign for Alabama.
Right.
But then what happens? And it was something that Alabama had not been very good at so far this season, and that was third and longs. And it was a 3rd down and 9 where it looks like he's getting pressure. Mm-hmm. He rolls out to his right. He uses his legs, and he buys time for guess who? Ryan Williams to come back to the football, extend that drive. You had another conversion on that drive. I thought that was a huge statement, Coach, psychologically, not only for Alabama but to LSU's detriment.
Yeah, I think, now we could look at LSU and look at the trouble they had against Texas A&M with quarterback run. I think we saw it again. There's different reasons for that. We thought at Texas A&M that they were prepared for a throw and all of a sudden they get a runner. You had to think, okay, let's look back to kind of what he did against Missouri. What did they do against first half against Georgia? That's what they're going to try to get back to. Now, knowing it and stopping him is two different things.
All right, in regards to what you saw from an LSU defensive standpoint, I think that's why most LSU people are just upset. And like you just mentioned, you can plan everything in the world, but it's trying to stop someone like Jalen Milroe. That's another story. But for LSU fans, they just do not feel like what you learned in the second half of the Texas A&M game, that those problems continue to be there. They've got dudes on defense. Was it the scheme? I mean, when you're watching it, was there anything that you would have done in particular to maybe try to slow up the Alabama running attack?
Yeah, we talked about in the show Monday, I would have packed the box. I would have played more man coverage, make him beat me over the top, maybe one high safety, a lot of more one looks. And Alabama does have a pretty sophisticated passing attack, no doubt. But where are they now? Where were they headed? And one of the things as a defensive coach, you're looking at trends. What is the thought process? What are they having success with? If we, I always want to make guys left-handed. So if they were having to spread to throw, that's a favor to us. Don't let him run the ball. Don't let quarterback runs beat us. Don't give him easy throws. Make him beat us over the top. Not that he hadn't with Ryan Williams. So we know that's possible, but that's where I would have to be beaten, not with his legs, especially they were trending in that direction. Now, the one thing we don't need to forget, Alabama's defense, I think, much improved from the mindset. I think it goes back to the head coach's mindset about toughness, practice, not making as many excuses, being a little bit tougher on them. That helps your defensive team. The defense now has 2 games in a row have played well.
Well, yeah, it's their last 2 SEC games, Coach. You got 8 quarters combined from Missouri to LSU, and you surrendered 13 points to 2 ranked teams.
Yep.
I was really impressed on the defensive side. Kane Womack, I thought that defense, and he said, hopefully by the end of the season they'll have a good grasp. It seems like they're getting a lot better grasp of it now. But the lack of explosive plays through the air that Nussmeier, that's their strength on offense. Yep. And whether it was Kyron Lacey, whether it was Aaron Anderson, the longest play that they had through the air was 28 yards. And that was huge, I thought, for Alabama to have success and maybe make LSU a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, I think once you start eliminating excuses, and granted, balls are in the air, they're 50-50 balls. Sometimes that other guy comes down even when you're in position. But I think they're running to the football, and that's what makes up for a missed tackle when there's a second guy there and a third guy there, and physicality. That's a mindset. That's a way you practice, and if you practice that way and you believe that way, you're going to get those results, especially with talent.
Before we move on from the LSU-Alabama game, I do want to ask you towards the back end of the game, because once it got out of hand, they weren't coming back.
Yeah.
At that juncture, when do you take your starting quarterback out? Because you got a clip of Brian Kelly getting ticked off at Alabama for the second teamers. Womack is still bringing guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's bringing 5, 6, 7 guys on Nussmeier, and he's over there yelling at the official and things of that nature. Well, guess what, Coach? You still got your starting quarterback in. Again, I go back to Steve Spurrier. He always said, it's your job to stop me. Yep. It's not my job to slow down so you can catch up. Just your thoughts on that quarterback still being in there when the game is well in hand.
Yeah, and I think defensively, it was never my job to take defensive players out. It was your job, if you're down, to back off with running game, maybe with – and I always knew you put in the other quarterback. Now, if you're throwing it every down, I've got to come after you.
Sure.
So if I'm sitting over on defense and you show me that you're ready to give in, I will give in. But I'm not giving in when you still got your starting quarterback and you're throwing it every down. There's too many games that have been lost that way. Sorry.
I want to go back to your Prattville days. You said that you guys had a live lion that came to one.
We did.
Omar Bradley, the Tiger that they brought in from Florida. That was the most lethargic Tiger. Please tell me your line was more active and a little bit more rambunctious than what we got Saturday.
Yeah, our line, we had raw meat. No, I'm kidding.
Come on,
I'm telling you,
Coach,
from being in a room with one of those guys, and you've seen the cartoon with the cat, he gets sliced. That was, I'm taking a picture with this line behind me, and I'm really thinking I could do that picture where I got sliced, because when it roared, our kids did not even know it was in the back.
So where'd the line come from?
There was one of those wild game preserves down there in South Alabama. And they always would tell the story that the neighbors would call, and they'd been there for years, and say, your lions are out, your animals are out. And they said, no, we're just feeding them. I mean, you can hear a lion 5 miles away.
You can, because where I live, you can hear at certain times, certain mornings from the Birmingham Zoo.
Yeah.
You can hear that lion.
So long story short.
I don't want to be in the same room.
No, sedated is the way to go.
All right, so let's talk about the Auburn Tigers. They had an off week, Coach. They're getting ready for a very pesky Louisiana Monroe team. Obviously, you know that team very well. The coach Brian Vincent. Landrum saw him in person as UAB played them earlier in the year. This is a big game for Auburn, because if Auburn doesn't get this one, they're not going bowling, and that's huge for this program.
Yeah, so start with Coach Vincent. I feel sorry for him. This is his 4th team that had an open date before him. I said, I don't know who you made mad prior to taking this job. And then you get Auburn with an open date.
Yeah.
Now, we know Thorne sounds like he's banged up. Obviously, we'll probably may get the backup. Who now you're going from, remember we talked about before, obviously more of a true thrower. So I know Coach Vincent and those guys are trying to work on that. But I think, does Auburn trying to get back to the run game? Does Monroe pack the box? Obviously, Auburn's defense is good. And you would think Auburn, where are they with the fact that they lost a big game where they were looking ahead to Alabama? They've got 2 big games coming up. How much of that open date did they spend on Monroe, and how much of it did they spend on these next 2 opponents? I would think they did, working ahead. But obviously this is another – they got to have this game.
Yeah, they got to have this game. It's a game, let's be honest, that they should win, and they're at home. But I think what Auburn fans want to see from especially this coaching staff, and namely Hugh Freeze, show some signs of progress. And can he finally beat, no disrespect to Kentucky or to Cal last year, which I think still is his best win that he's had in his tenure at Auburn, Can he finally beat a quality football team?
Yeah. Yeah, I think obviously we know the defense has played pretty well. Can you get back to your running game? Can you get some consistency, especially as you're trying to get to those next two games that you need to win also with teams that's probably theoretically better than you?
I want to ask you about UAB. So UAB, it looked like they were playing a really good game, playing a good UConn team. UConn, one of the better defensive teams in America. And unfortunately for the Blazers, just a nightmarish fourth quarter as they lose again, this time to the Huskies.
Yeah, I think great credit goes first half. I think sounds like I'd heard they'd made some practice changes on their open date. And it showed in the week before. They played well. We talked about them playing for more than themselves, playing in the Children's Harbor game, playing for each other, playing for the names on the back. And I think it carried over to the first half. Now these are the games you got to find ways to win. I think they're on the 25 going in. They're up, and they throw a pick. Go back, I think statistically, if you'll look at when they run the ball, and they run the ball X amount of times, because they know they can throw the ball. If they would keep their running game going, and, of course, hindsight's always 20/20. That was a tough one to lose, especially where they were at half. And I thought on Saturday they were potentially the better team. So I know they're very disappointed.
Yeah, and going back to that throw, and I was down there to see it at eye level, and that was where Jalen Kitna's throwing to a spot and did not see that his wide receiver had run out of bounds, and it was a heck of an athletic play by the UConn defensive back. But to your point, Coach, they were running the football effectively. Lee Beebe and that nice run that he had off the left side right before the half. But turnovers. Yeah. And you're right. Finding ways. Some teams can get away with it, but I think Trent Dilfer would be the first to say we're not there yet as a football team where those mistakes are magnified, and unfortunately they can cost you a football game.
So here's where fans have got to see, all right, here's the mirror as a head coach, and I say what wins games, what loses games, and it's fun to get to go out there and RPO and throw and do all those things and create numbers. What wins games? We're going to talk about Ole Miss and Coach Kiffin making a change to looking more like what I would say a real football coach, head coach looks like. And that sounds like a strong statement against him, as good a coach as he is. Same thing here. Some of these throws and some of these RPOs, set yourself up, especially when you need it. You got the game, just go win it, and you can run the ball on folks, and then you just can't do it. It's just not in your system, or you can't pull back the reins. I think that's where you got to hold the mirror up to yourself and go, what does it take to win games?
All right, Coach, Smart Bank, Smart Call of the Week. Let's talk about Birmingham's own Brent Key, the head coach of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, as they knock off the fourth-ranked Miami Hurricanes over in Atlanta. And this Georgia Tech team, we saw it from game one over across the pond in Dublin, Ireland, that this team was going to be pesky in the ACC, and they pull off a big upset over the weekend.
Yeah, so a lot of great things here. You got the quarterback, King, rush for almost 100 yards. I like what they do with their run game. They do a lot of different two people pulling with counter pulls and fake pulls and different ways. They have a really good way to run the ball. So I thought their offense was really good. They held Miami down, especially in the second half when they've come back against everybody. It was a rushing attack versus their rushing attack against stopping or taking away Miami's running the ball. So run the ball and stop the run, we always talk about. So they did that. They were 4 for 4 in the red zones on touchdowns. So Miami couldn't stop them in there from getting their touchdowns. They were 9 for 14 on third down. But I go back to those run schemes and their defense in the fourth quarter really standing up to when Miami's really been good.
Mario.
Just it's just a great win, a great scene afterwards, and that's what it's all about, And of course, Miami's been kind of living dangerously all year.
They sure have. Smart Bank, Coach, a bunch of guys that very, very well.
Yeah, I was with those guys yesterday at Smart Bank, and once again, it's the small town banking feel where folks, you get answers immediately. They were talking about yesterday. Said, how many times do you know your banker's name? And I think that's a big deal for those guys. But you get all the big banking feel and all the things you need. So Smart Bank, those guys are doing a really good job there.
Webb Concrete and Building Materials, building blocks to victory. Tennessee, looking for that knockout punch, Coach, between the hedges.
Yeah, I think where is Tennessee's quarterback? What's Nico? Obviously he's concussion protocol. What I liked last week, going back to talking about them, vertical shots. We've talked about how that's such a part of their game, and he was hitting them last week. Now, Mississippi State, but I've seen, obviously in Alabama they hit some, especially in the second half. He seems to be progressing. They seem to be getting better. Maybe understanding the offense a little bit better. So, Georgia, I tell you one thing I will brag on Georgia. Game was over. If you notice, they're already talking about Tennessee. That says a lot about them. You know, the head coach was talking about them, the quarterback was talking about them. So this is going to be a great one. Georgia's won, 28 straight games at home. So this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, when I look at Georgia right now, and you've got a wounded animal, and maybe Tennessee feels like they got a little bit of house money to play with based on the latest CFP and projections there. But this is a Georgia team. This is an interesting spot and one that Kirby Smart and this program has not been in. I just wonder, you know, what is the plan going to be offensively against a pretty sound Tennessee defense? And you know, can Carson Beck get out of his own way and create explosive plays?
Well, and we're going to talk about Ole Miss here in a minute, but I think they showed some things about what to do. Now, granted, some of the things you can't replicate the guys they got up front. But I think this is going to be, once again, kind of like last week, Georgia's defense against Tennessee's offense. But conversely, Georgia has got to produce more offensively, to your point. And Beck, you know, it's turned into they've got to have him throwing the ball, and he's just not getting it done right now.
What do you think when you see that offense? I know a lot of criticism of Mike Bobo in regards to his offensive play calling. Does it start up front with the offensive line not being as dominant as it has been in years past for Georgia, and it's just not giving them the opportunity for Carson Beck to get the time or to open up the run game?
Well, they are still so talented, but they were such a freak show. I mean, the last few. I mean, just unbelievable. And we've talked about the NFL roster and the most guys drafted in the first round. I think they've dialed back offensively to just seeming normal humans, you know, and it's to go from that to what they've had maybe, but I don't see a dominant. We can't name a dominant player. We can't name a dominant receiver who goes and gets the ball. Now that's when you got to look at yourself and, you know, maybe we didn't recruit as good as we should have. I mean, I don't think they have. I think defensively, yes. I think they've got really good players on offense, but they don't have the great players. You know, we played them a few years ago. You got 3 NFL running backs. You got a tight end and multiple receivers, 2 tight ends and multiple receivers who are starters on NFL rosters. So they've dropped off a little bit offensively, and it's showing.
I'm right there with you. I think it's the elite skill. Not so much a difference maybe in the offensive line, but the elite skill that they don't have or they're missing seemingly, because I can go back and when Georgia, they've always been solid on the defensive side, Coach. But on the offensive side in years past, if you go back and look, their offenses look pedestrian at times. Just ho-hum, run-of-the-mill offense. But you had a guy like Brock Bowers. You had a guy like Ladd McConkey, a George Pickens that could take the top off of a defense. They don't have that this year.
No, you still got to have those elite players at that level. The best of the best have those guys on offense that can just go make plays, and that's what they're missing right now. So, which I feel that's where you see the quarterback pressing. You know, he's pressing, trying to make plays, make throws, and there's not guys there just to make the plays. And you know, sometimes you get spoiled. I think they've gotten a little bit spoiled. Now, granted, they've also had a really good schedule. You know, they've had all these players in a really favorable schedule, and they have played. It's murderer's row, and you know, something had to give there, and give Ole Miss credit for taking advantage of it. So this is going to be a good one. They're at home. Tennessee, though, they've got to know that they've lost a bunch in a row to them. This is a huge game for them, big game for the head coach, kind of like getting the Alabama monkey off their back. You know, they're thinking, can we get this Georgia monkey off our back?
I was really surprised in looking at this overall series, and they started playing back in 1899, but Georgia, I believe, holds the edge 28-23.
Yeah,
which is a lot closer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, you know, I think it was very even in the last few years. It's really gotten a little bit lopsided just recently.
Webb Concrete and Building Materials, Coach, they bring us that segment each and every week.
Yeah, we appreciate our folks at Webb, you know, and they do it all. They have concrete, building supplies, flooring. They've got the Oxford showroom and ready mix, Heflin, Roanoke Center, Birmingham, Homewood, and then Pell City's got it all, lumber, concrete, and flooring.
A lot of debate over the college football playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday night. A lot of debate. A lot of people on social media, they come after you each and every week because Alabama Power 5 of the week. They always criticize your rankings, Coach. So I mean, we're going to go ahead and let you. I'm sure he's got BYU number 1, Landrum.
Probably does.
Well, shoot, I need to mark that out. I thought BYU was number 1, but
this be our weekly reminder that the last time that BYU lost a college football game was in the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl in a sloppy Shreveport, Louisiana, and a Bill Clark-led UAB team dominated them for 60 minutes.
There are some truths in there, and we're going to go with those.
This being brought to you by Radiance Technologies and Bill Clark.
Of course, this is Alabama Power, so we'll talk Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2, Texas 3, Tennessee 4, Penn State 5. I question that.
Yeah.
Indiana 6, BYU 7. There's BYU. Notre Dame 8. Now, here's where we're a little bit different. I've got Alabama 9, Ole Miss 10, Georgia 11, Miami 12.
BYU was what again?
7.
Okay. All right. Alabama Power.
Alabama Power, we always want to talk about our guys at Alabama Power. Obviously, we know them for producing the electricity we need. But, I think they're philanthropic, giving back to our community, being part of so many great projects. And, of course, also for our economy. They're very interested in conservation, which I know is important to a lot of our listeners.
Donahue Chevrolet's Drive for Success. Let's talk a little Heisman Trophy, Coach. Just some of the guys that you've seen so far this season that you would say, you know what, these guys are worthy of conversation right now.
Yeah, obviously we've got Ashton Jeanty with Boise. We've got Dylan Gabriel with Oregon, Travis Hunter with Colorado, Jalen Milrose back in the game. So let's talk about Jeanty first. I think he rushed for about 200, a little bit over 200 yards last week. He is my favorite. I love all the things about him. I know that maybe not everything, but all his intangibles, all the things that his teammates say. Obviously, Travis Hunter, doesn't come off the field. He's gotten more snaps. I think last week he ended up with 85 snaps on defense. He's got 69 catches for the year. So it's a good – those two guys right there together, I think they're both great. I'm a little bit for Jeanty in front. We talked about Gabriel, but, to me, after what Jalen Milroe did last week, you got to bump him up. Let's see what happens these last few weeks. Does it stay? How does everybody play? But that's where my mind is right now.
I'm right there with you. Unfortunately, the Heisman Trophy, I feel like it's been diminished over the years, and I'm not even sure why. But it was appointment television for me, especially if we had somebody in state that was going to be there in New York representing. But now it just seems like one of those things that's in the background. Why is that?
One, we've got so many awards, and I think we're all bombarded with so much information. There were so many things that were must-see TV because there wasn't as much.
Sure.
And now there's so much information. There's so many awards, and this one still should stand. I just hope they, to me, it's so much about, are we getting the best player? And also, what does that embody? Can you put those two things together? I don't have any negatives on any of the rest either, but to me right now, based on what I've seen, complete work the whole year.
If you're giving the award to who means more to their team and their success, then I think Cam Ward probably wins it from Miami.
Yeah, theoretically.
Where is Miami without Cam Ward at quarterback this season?
And he's no doubt got to be in your conversation and the loss, but we talked about that earlier. Does how your team plays, is that a big deal? Obviously it does, but, man, he's had an unbelievable year.
Let me ask you this. The opposing team, the opposing player that you faced in your career as a college football coach, who was the most dynamic player you've ever faced?
Oh, my gosh. I'm gonna have to think on that.
Okay.
I don't have one that just jumps out. I really don't. I've got some good ones. I've got some good. We talked about the guys at Georgia that are still playing, and I even go back to high school. We were supposed to see Pat White. He'd gotten injured. I think about what he did in college. So we saw a lot of good ones. I don't know if I just have one that just stands out above the rest.
Well, one that does stand out above the rest, and that's Donahue Chevrolet.
Yeah, our friends at Donahue Chevrolet, obviously, I love those guys, and they were such big sponsors of ours at UAB and took care of us so much, and I'm driving one of their Tahoes. But I think right now we got 1.9% APR for 60 months on a 2024 Chevy Silverado 1500 crew cab, no dealer doc fee. You can go to DonahueChevrolet.com and check those guys out. They're going to take good care of you.
You got that personalized tag, too. Says,
right.
I beat BYU.
That's right.
Radiance Technology Defense of the Week. We don't have to go very far. We go to Oxford, Mississippi, because what Pete Golding's defense has done this year, it's the best that money can buy, but that's the world we live in now. Just what have you seen with this Ole Miss defense and really kind of putting the clamps down on Georgia?
Yeah, so I think to your point, though, let's talk about what Kiffin said, really kind of about how he built that defense. And I think based on the butt kicking he took in Georgia and what those people look like. And I'm going to kind of even go back to my past at UAB when we brought the program back. They got bigger. And I think that was a purposeful, we've got to get bigger up front, specifically on defense. We got to find those big guys. Now, granted, they spent the money to get them, but they changed what they look like on defense and got more physical up front. Other thing they did, I know this is a defensive segment, but he looked like a head coach in this game. He kicked field goals down in the red zone. He didn't go for every fourth down. once again, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, and of course, everybody's got their philosophies, analytics, going for every fourth down. Sometimes those win, but in the games that count, I think this was playing to your defense, and look what it did for them. So this defense has changed what they look like. I think, I know Pete when he was at San Antonio. We played him when he was at San Antonio. Always did a good job there, obviously going to Alabama. But, they had 5 sacks. They had 4 fumbles called. They held them to 10 points, held them to 59 rushing yards. So the physicality, the size up front, and twitchy guys up front has made a difference. Right?
And what's scary about this Ole Miss team now, and I know that they had their setbacks, but the College Football Playoff Committee, they got to recognize eye test. We talk about eye test all the time. Who is playing their best football right now?
Yep.
I don't think there's any denying it. And I would love for you to say who is playing better football right now than Ole Miss, and evidence the last 2 weeks. You go to Reynolds Razorback Stadium against an Arkansas team that believes they got a chance to win.
Yep.
And you demoralize them.
Yeah.
And then what we saw last week in a big game, and Georgia knew that it's not like you snuck up on Georgia. They knew they were going to be in a dogfight. They tried to bring their A game, and you still held serve. I would not want to be any team that sees this Ole Miss team playing this way in the first round, in the second round. That's going to be a tough matchup for whoever draws them.
Yeah, I think if he can be consistent with the process, a little bit more conservative, which is what I saw, because he's got enough RPOs and he's got enough offensive mindset, but play to your defense just a little bit more, which I think he did. I think the results are going to be scary.
In regards to what you've seen in the Southeastern Conference, or maybe even nationally, I mean, would you say that Ole Miss, number one in the SEC, from an eye test point of view defensively, and can that defense lead them to the potential of playing for a national championship?
I really do. If all things, injuries, all those things hang together, I think right now they are hot. They've got the people we've already known. And I think, obviously they lost a close game earlier. So right now what I saw, and I would say the same thing possibly about Alabama. Can Alabama maintain what they're doing right now? Because we know they've got the talent.
All right, so to play this out in your mind right now, if whoever you believe is going to win their respective conference championship, and I know that it's up in the air, but let's just take the teams that were listed last night in the college football playoff. Would you take one of those teams, like in Oregon? You want to throw in Texas? They were thrown in. Would you take one of those teams or somebody outside of that top 4 you think having a better chance of winning it, the likes of an Ole Miss, potentially in Alabama?
My first choice right now, and I know this is out of those 4 is Texas, because I think their defense is playing really good. They've got a quarterback. They've got skilled players everywhere. You've got an offensive head coach that gets it.
Is that more about ceiling for you?
I think so. Yeah,
okay.
I think so. But who I think is the hottest right now may be Ole Miss.
Radiance Technologies Defense of the Week. And I know, speaking of defense, they know a little bit about that.
Yeah, Radiance Technology do so many cool things, but they are really just, when you start talking about our nation, obviously we had the big election, and but drone technology and defense against drones and all these cool things with lasers. Obviously, they also support the Radiance Technology Bowl down in Shreveport, which we've discussed before. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but obviously that's a big game to me. But appreciate the guys at Radiance also sponsoring our Children's Harbor game that UAB had a couple weeks ago now. And don't want to forget the Porch Creek Indians that also were big sponsors of that as well.
Also, a major thank you to Jimmy Lee and Dr. Pepper in Buffalo Rock, because you can't say enough about Jimmy Lee and the fine folks over there at Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, thanks to Dr. Pepper for what they do just for college football, and always Buffalo Rock, such a great sponsor. So many philanthropic things around our community, and, of course, Jimmy Lee.
Do you anticipate another crazy weekend, or do you think it's going to be kind of laid back, not much going on, no chaos?
I think this may be less chaos this week. Georgia, Tennessee. I don't, because that's
See, me and Landry, we want chaos.
Yes.
Like we text each other all the time. Like we want absolute upsets.
Yep.
We want to come in on Monday. It's about what's going to make for the best Bill Clark show the next week.
We want heads exploding, Coach.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about our shows. Are they good?
It's about the content.
Is it content?
Yes,
that's
absolutely. For all of us here at the Bill Clark Show, thanks for tuning us in. Catch us on all these social media platforms and wherever you stream. This is the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.